One artifact of this migration are the bee fifes that are scattered along the route. Acting as instrument, tool, and shrine, bee fifes are objects of beauty and fascination for the pilgrims, who are motivated to make the trek along the migration path to visit them and pay homage to the bees that facilitate fertile crops. As the bees follow their migration, they pause at each of the fifes along the way, using them as temporary hives. These bees then explore the area around the fife, sometimes traveling as far as 10 miles, collecting nectar and pollen before returning to the shrine. When the area has been exhausted, the bees and beekeeper then move on to the next stop. The bee fifes are made by humans in order to harvest the honey left behind by the migratory bees. They are made up of hollow tubes punctured with holes to allow for bees to circulate in and out. The structures facilitate the wandering path of the bees, but also catch the wind to produce sound or music. The openings can also be used to tap the structure like a maple tree when harvesting syrup. Sound is affected by the structure of the honeycomb accumulating in the tubes. As the holes are obstructed, there are fewer nodes, lengthening the wavelengths and lowering the sounds produced. As the pipes fill, however, the inverse happens, where the shortening of the air column produces a higher pitched sound, acting as a siren to signal to the beekeepers that the fife is ready to be tapped. The sounds produced by the fife fall into the D to F range in different octaves, giving the whistling a haunting melody. These are the bass notes produced by the pipes of the bee fife, which will soon rise as they fill with honeycomb. Researchers have experimented with different methods of transcribing the sounds produced by the fifes. They first explored using a pitch meter measured in hertz, but found this difficult for laymen to interpret. They then transcribed it as music, but this was imprecise and unscientific. They finally devised a new notation, bounded by the upper and lower ranges of the instrument, and with a center line separating the two octaves. The melody of the fife is represented in the peaks and valleys derived from their pitch. While the hertz charts show the pitch of the sound in a single moment, the fife notation can be arranged in a continuous circle to represent the ever-changing pattern of the wind. This is a representation of how the wind interacts with the structures and carries the sound to the people in the surrounding area. The orientation of certain tubes projects the sound directionally, and this effect is compounded by the wind catching and carrying certain melodies across the valleys and plains. Scattered along the migration route, different people will experience the bee fife's melodies in unique ways. People close to the fife will have similar experiences, while the people in towns further from the origin will hear a similar melody at a slight delay, while the sounds that have reached the furthest outposts, warped by the wind and ridges that separate them, will be transformed into a new, unique song. Now all of the users of the fife have congregated. For the bees, the fife acts as a home hive to store precious honey as they travel along their migration. For the pilgrim, it acts as a shrine symbolizing a tenuous connection to nature, which only thrives along the green belt. For the farmer, the bees are vital to the cultivation of their crops, which require the pollination of the bees in order to produce. And for the beekeeper, it represents their way of life and their livelihood, allowing them to cultivate bees and provide pollination for the crops of the surrounding communities. Taking a closer look, here we see a fife full of honey and ready for harvest. The warm tones of the rings show high-pitched notes alerting the beekeepers and gathering them. As the frenzied bees spill from the openings, the pilgrims watch attentively from a distance as the collection is performed. After the fife has been tapped and drained of its honey, the beekeepers transfer their harvest into barrels for transport and educate the remaining pilgrims. They will then guide their hive on to the next stop of their journey. Now the tones of the fife are cooler, deepening once more until next year.